Hi, Mako.
Hey, Julia, good to see you.
Good to see you. Welcome home. You've been all over.
It just seems like we're actually headed off to Japan and Vietnam in 2 weeks, so I get adjusted and I go back again. But that's okay.
What a time to live that you can have this peripatetic life.
It is, and yeah, like, we're just grateful that we can do it. There's yeah, so
Something very exciting
ah,
came in the mail this week. This beautiful new
oh
book.
my
It
gosh,
comes out on Tuesday, right?
yes, 21st, yes,
The publication date, but my pre-order came early
I
and I was
know.
so delighted. The book itself, it smells really good.
Uh,
I don't know if you've noticed that.
yes.
They used really fresh ink and you
Oh,
can smell
interesting.
the difference.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
Um,
I have noticed that, and just when you get it, you have this kind of moment with, just the object of what
yes.
this is. And I, Jennifer Banks, who is the editor, brought it to Fuji Farm Feast, and when I first saw it, she was of course like um, wondering what I would my reaction would be, and I was like, "Wow, this is more beautiful than I expected."
Yeah.
And you're right, the kind of quality of printing um, seems almost, yeah, really fresh, and there's just magic to it, how they laid it out. And of course, Dustin Kilgore, who's the designer at Yale Press, really pushed me to do things that I would have never done on my own, such as a cover, and
Yeah.
I would have never put my Mason bee and dandelion in front of my cover. But that's the whimsy of this, and it's really precious.
Yeah. And the craft paper with the gold foil
Yeah.
and how, as you said, how whimsical that is. But then if you take the dust jacket off, it
Yes.
becomes this very
Yeah.
solid, beautiful
Yeah. Very
object as
simple.
well in its
Yeah.
simplicity. And I
Yeah.
think that all of these design elements are present in the text that you present as well.
Right. It's consistent with what I wrote, which is really an amazing integration of a designer actually reading your book and responding to it. It's a collaboration. Any book is a collaboration or should be. And my friend Andy Crouch was holding it at this gathering, and he said, "Well, this is the most anti-marketing book I have ever seen." Like, because they usually make the cover for marketing, right? This is supposed to scream and stand out, and this is kind of very quiet. You may not notice it, unless you have a certain propensity to look for interesting covers. And but it is beautiful, and it feels um, precious, as a object. And so I was so grateful for the commitment that they have toward excellence and aesthetic that is unusual. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was as though they were gifting us Easter eggs because the spectrum
Yes.
into the light, like it was just, there were so many design delights in addition to the
Yeah.
text,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think as an artist, it's so refreshing to see a book written by an artist,
Hmm.
designed by an artist,
Yeah.
and like it just layer upon layer of meaning is able
Yeah.
to be presented and gifted
Yeah.
to the reader, right?
Yeah. It is a gift to the reader. And that's what Jennifer first said to me was, let's create a beautiful book, coming out of the pandemic. And of course, to create a beautiful book, you go through many processes, and each step you're wondering what kind of beauty is there, how do we capture it, or even maximize it with the limitations that you have. And just in every sense, they're just such they operate at a high level, and I just felt like a recipient of that, that group of people who are committed to gifting something to the reader. And so it was the strenuous process of just getting through it, as you know, any kind of art, um, writing, it's giving birth is always um, uh, a process of pushing yourself and see how far you can go. But it was really a delight when I first saw it. I was like, wow, we did produce something that's very beautiful for people to enjoy.
And in the book, you write, art is a liturgy of peace.
Hmm.
And I wonder how that ties in with this construction of beauty, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We talk about culture care. We're part of, you serve on the board of I Am Culture Care, and we've been journeying into a world that is increasingly fractured and divided, polarized, and wars coming out of those things. And yeah, we believe as artists that our contribution to the world is to bring integration, um, and bring the differences, the prismatic colors to come together in a new way. And this book attempts to do that. It writes about that. It makes it, I hope, evident that actually it's possible for every single person to seek peace,
Mm.
and not to create more false binaries, where we are demonizing the other, right? Which we are ultimately demonizing ourselves, but we don't realize that when we are being defensive, or this we live into storyline of power, or prestige, or get sucked into that. And all of us are complicit, and yet I think artists can have something to say about complexity and messiness. And when we have the ability to see that reality even breaking apart, but we are able to hold it together in our minds. We trained ourselves, right, to understand that true beauty, lasting beauty, can come when we hold on to the things that are disparaged and breaking apart and polarized, and those, so I talk about complementary colors, right? The red and green really warring against each other, and yet Matisse can make them sing. So, so how do we learn to do that as human beings, and so liturgy of peace, how do we create that in our own ordinary lives?
Mhm. Yeah. And you also talk about what you asked the question on page 143, what needs to happen for art to once again provide the backdrop to the theater of everyday lives?
Yes.
And I think that ties in with what you've just said in
Yeah.
like the contrasting complementary colors and the Tabasco label and
Yes.
heritage design. And how do we, how are we aware of all of the messages that are being presented to us daily?
Hmm.
And then how do we as a culture shift towards images and content that are promoting peace,
Hmm.
that are promoting
Hmm.
whole community, what would that look like? What steps do we need to take to move towards that?
It's about stewardship of imagination first, right? I mean, you mentioned that journey of seeing something or experiencing something. It's really experience of wonder, wonderment, and how that rewires our brain, right?
Mm,
I mean, it literally does. And so, art, music, theater, nature, you know, can bring us out of our malaise and self-inflicting wounds, and somehow allow us to um, see something that is beautiful, as a child might, in a given environment. You can see a child looking at something and something ordinary and saying, this is extraordinary, this is beautiful. I think in the same way, arts can help us to refocus and re-narrate, reimagine, even though reality seems so harsh and oppressive today. And I think that's probably a common way to explain what's happening in culture. And yet, human experience, human mind and heart has the capacity to grow out of that or create out of that. Um, and when you look at the history of art, that's exactly what artists have done in the past. Hemingway wrote in Front Lines of War, and J.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, right? They both experienced this severe trauma, and their writing was a way for them to find wonderment again, to this adventure again, the sense of community again, and Frangelico painting him during the Black Plague, Shakespeare writing during the Black Plague. All these are signals, I think, which should be a signal to us today that, we have this stewardship responsibility for our imagination, despite what is happening, maybe because of what's happening. It's not an escapist fantasy to endeavor to create something out of, what I call ground zero experiences. You are facing that reality, the wasteland in front of you, but you can write something enduring, as T.S. Eliot did with Four Quartets. There's these are examples, people who've gone before us who stewarded their imagination well, and we need to do the same.
mm, yeah. What gives you fortification in the stewarding of your imagination?
Mm. Yeah, it's a great question. I think that's why culture care exists, is an effort to be very intentional about creating communities, not just of artists, but creative catalysts who believe that, culture is upstream from politics. What happens in culture uh, really will flow down into decisions that we make about the future. Uh, Artists are the imaginators, artists are the future makers. What we imagine, you know, can become reality. Of course, that translation is long and hard path, but we both believe in God, whose imagination is, right? There's no translation for the creator. It is immediate, as long, the creation is God's imagination. And we live and swim in that. So that's an encouragement that reality exists, um, because of this direct connection between God's imagination and what, the creation. And our imagination has kind of brought in, this distorted reality to that. We question it. We doubt, and we conspire against it, and that's what humans do. Um, so, in a sense, that recognition of our way of creating darkness is actually, in a strange way, an affirmation toward the arts and toward the imagination being reconfigured or transfigured into something that is more aligned with giving ourselves away, right? The idea of kenosis, idea that we can make art and live for others rather than for ourselves. This idea of love that gives itself away is ultimately what allows us to find ourselves, so community that encourages that we absolutely need. We need each other to remind ourselves because we're so um, embedded in our sense of scarcity and fear and anxiety. We have to have a community around us that keep keeps us accountable and reminds us, hey, what's happening in the studio, or how's your poem going, or these are reminders that we need to keep going. And I think our art ultimately is um, gives us courage, right? The word encourage is to give courage. And any great art of the past is given to us as a gift because they have endured their time of troubles and darkness and strife and war. And they remind us that, we, even though we see the world and we are disheartened by it, but in a sense, that's an affirmation that we need to push into imagination to create something in our area that's been given to us.
Mm. Yeah. And one of the ways you propose that artists and patrons do that is by observing what's around them,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so, what is going on in the garden right now?
Thanks for asking, Andrea. I love what happens to milkweeds, when they start to form these seeds. It's been about a month since they started to pop, but these little parachutes, so starts to float. There's a whole bunch in front of me, and wind comes and I write about dandelion seeds, my kind of nemesis, weed, and then I had to repent and to really embrace, what these seeds are doing is they don't know where they go, right? There's no sense of control, and yet in some ways, they are landing where they need to land and rooting where they need to root to ultimately rejuvenate the ground, the soil. Um, and it's just a beautiful thing to ponder upon, like because many of the things that we struggle with, we struggle because we lose control over them, right? And I guess the discipline is to, think like, seeds floating in the air let the wind carry you, and land where you may land. And I feel like that's just such a beautiful model for art too, because we always have to let go, right, of our work. There's no, if you're a creator of any kind, you're giving it into the world in some way. And it's a constant act of dying, dying to yourself, um, or enlarging your ego so you can control it. And that may work for a while, but ultimately, that it's not yours. It's given back to the world like a seed, and so I love that. They're late season in October and November, as the ground um, prepares itself for winter. You can see the birds, you know, beginning to do that, um, and then Hedge and I will be planting tulips, right? This is the time to plant tulips because they need a winter cold to set root. And we're going to have beautiful tulips in the spring if we are faithful in planting. And that's a amazing reality that we get to do things in planting ahead for the future. And again, there's no guarantee that those tulips will come up, and sometimes squirrels get to them and move them around. They become gardeners. But ultimately, you're always planting for the future.
Mhm.
And that's also what art is all about. You're always planting, and sometimes you never see a flower come up. But artists are kind of people that say that that's okay, I think. It will come up, and people like Emily Dickinson believe that, despite not, many people did not know that she wrote poetry, but she believed that they were like tulip bulbs being planted, in the soil culture.
Yeah. And these shows that are currently underway in
Right.
Asia right now,
Yeah.
those are long ago planted seeds.
Right. That's right. Yeah, they have works from mid 2000, and it's a large show, and two parts. It will go on for a year, and it's in Taiwan of all places, which is a really interesting flux right now, and I think very symbolic of our times. But it's beautiful. It's in a former military compound where soldiers awaited their deployment. So, here's instead of waiting for war, it's art that is presented as an antidote, right, for creation of peace. And so I am paired with another ceramic artist, Shozo Michikawa-san, and he's a remarkable ceramicist, and he literally creates ceramics out of ashes of volcanoes. He himself experienced his hometown destroyed by a volcanic eruption. And he's literally creating out of ashes, these beautiful objects. And so our work kind of speak to each other. And we never met him until the opening, and we had a great fellowship, two artists journeying together in the same direction, I think. And so yeah, that show is fortunately a long show. A lot of the gallery shows, is usually a month less, but this gives me time to reflect and really consider. It's a privilege really to consider something in a public sphere that can be an opportunity to, for an artist, as well as a viewer, to think about, think about peace in times of such a time as this, when so much is at stake.
Mm. Yeah. And even the work itself you write about in art is sometimes the date of its creation is decades.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a piece here that's silver and that's gonna tarnish intentionally, and it'll probably be 50 years before it's completed, right? I'm using silver a lot of late because of that. I want to create something that is not instantaneous and it cannot be digitized. It's the anti-digital, completely analog, but even the duration of what it means to execute, to produce something, um, is elongated, different for these works, and so just like the cover of the book, it tends to be very difficult to market, right? And to talk about. And yet, I think it's the most important message today is to create something that is not, it's not possible to put on Instagram, in its essence. Um, but it points to something else, and 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 creating meaning out of things that are ephemeral or things that are disappearing, things that are changing, is, I think, part of our work today, and it's ultimately what will keep us human. We are developing senses and our imagination to seek, this reality at large, rather than shrinking them, to reduce them to to please certain algorithm, and expanding our imagination and fortifying what we can do in terms of sensory knowledge, somatic knowledge, is something we really have to do, as human beings. But as artists, we are already in the process of doing that, creating a language that is connected with the physical, with the material. So I think that's part of what the message of the book is about.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much hope in the book, right?
Oh, thank you.
It's these seasons, I can observe them here and now.
Mm.
They have persisted, they will persist.
Yes,
I will make with hope that this work will be observed in the future.
yes, yes.
We are not going to be destroyed.
Right. Oh, and that's the mystery of making, is that every artist feel that in their bones, that there's some, what the scriptures talks about, substance of things hoped for, embedded, in front of you. Like what's happening in front of you is a small miracle that captures that reality breaking in. Um, and we will be consumed, I think, with so much of fear and anxiety for the future if we don't learn to create. And I think it's not only an antidote, it's a necessity for, for us to remain human,
Mm.
in what some have called post-human times. I, I really do think that, increasingly we need artists to take the lead in this, in society. Um, we've seen the effect of industrial revolution, creating efficiency and scalability, and how people who take advantage of that, can rule the world, right? And we've seen examples of people who manipulate the media or know how to create in the virtual media space, uh, take over the world. We've seen spectacles being built by pastors and all sorts of people for certain ways, certain messaging that captures people's imagination. But it turns out most of them have been, a attempt to manipulate people rather than to help people grow. Um, well, artists are the ones that hopefully we are doing what we do, being faithful to the materials, faithful to reality in front of us. And we're not afraid of revealing what is, in front of us, and to even critique that. That's part of art. But we also have a capacity to create something that will literally reshape the future. And so why not look at what we do as part of that stewardship of imagination for society at large? And obviously, who knows who will listen to that, but it's okay because if we're faithful to do what we've been tasked to do, even in small scale every day, it will break through in a world that is full of corruption and lies and deceit. If it's truthful, it's going to, the stones will be crying out and our art will be crying out. And people who need to hear that, who has the ears to hear, heart open, will eventually land, just like those seeds, they will land there, because we're creating a good soil. And it allows roots to take place, to dig in to the soil. So that's my that's my hope writing this book. It's when you write it, you always wonder like if anybody's going to read it. So thank you for reading it.
I've read it. I wrote a review on Storygraph.
Thank you.
It's great. I think other people will enjoy reading this. And the images, the paintings, this book really highlighted your skill with the brush, as you wrote about, but it
Right.
really does highlight your ability to render things so masterfully.
Oh,
Um, and yeah, it was a lovely reflection on seasonality.
yeah. As I say, it's my slice of expression. It's like this tiny little gift that I received that I try to cultivate. But thank you for that
Yes.
encouragement.
So everybody else can get their copy. It comes out
Yes,
on Tuesday,
yes.
and that we can all see different ways of stewarding imagination and
Mhm.
cultivating future hope.
Amen.